The humble life of Karam Din. In the heart of rural Punjab, nestled among mustard fields and dusty trails, lived a man named Karam Din. His house was modest, brick walls softened by years of weather and care, but it pulsed with life, warmth, and laughter. A widower in his 40s, Karam Din bore the weight of fatherhood with quiet pride, raising his 3 daughters alone since the passing of his beloved wife, Amina, 10 years ago. Each day began before the first call to prayer. Karam Din would rise, perform ablution in the chilly water drawn from the hand pump, and stand in silent prayer under the pale morning sky. As he worked his small patch of land, tilling soil that rarely yielded much, thoughts of his daughters kept him going. To him, they were not a burden, never had been. They were his strength, his hope, and the only legacy he wished to leave behind. His eldest, Gul Bano, was 18. Mature beyond her years, she had inherited her mother's calm and compassion. She helped with the household chores, cooked meals, and had learned embroidery from an elderly neighbor. She spoke little but observed everything, her eyes always searching for ways to ease her father's burden. Zahida, 16, was the firebrand of the family. Bold, outspoken, and fiercely intelligent, she questioned traditions with a sharp tongue. She once asked the village imam why girls weren't allowed to read books in the mosque library, and caused such a stir that some elders still frowned when she passed by. Then there was Nusrat, the youngest at 14. Delicate and soft-spoken, she was the dreamer of the trio. She painted with charcoal and crushed berry juice, creating visions of trees, faces, and skies that seemed far too vivid to belong to such a small, tired village. Despite the family's closeness, whispers floated in the air like dust. 3 daughters and no sons, people said with pity. Who will carry his name? Who will provide when he's old? The pressure to marry them off came not only from neighbors but sometimes even from well-meaning relatives. But Karam Din stood firm. "I did not raise flowers to be plucked and thrown into strange gardens," he once told a cousin who brought a marriage proposal for Gul Bano. "Let them grow. Let them bloom where they choose." That spring, a turning point arrived. A letter came from the local madrasa inviting boys from the village to take a free placement exam. Zahida, upon reading it, turned to her father and asked, "Why only boys? Can I go?" He hesitated, not because he doubted her, but because he knew what it would mean. The gossip. The judgment. Still, after a pause, he nodded. "Go. Just be careful." True to form, Zahida marched into that classroom and left the boys stunned with her performance. She didn't pass. Officially, the madrasa would not accept girls, but her story spread. Some laughed. Some scoffed. But a few parents began asking, quietly, if Zahida could help teach their daughters how to read. Meanwhile, Gul Bano began stitching clothes for neighbors. She made her first sale, a baby's kurta, for 5 rupees. She brought the money to her father and placed it gently in his calloused hand. "I stitched it with my own thread," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes misting. "You've stitched more than cloth, my daughter. You've stitched hope into this house." Their world was still fragile, still poor, but it was full of quiet victories. And though the nights were long and food was often meager, the house echoed with something the wealthiest homes lacked: dignity. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the fields, casting golden light over the horizon, Karam Din sat on the charpai outside his house. His daughters gathered around him, each occupied, Gul Bano sewing, Zahida reading a borrowed book, Nusrat sketching with a bit of charcoal. Looking at them, Karam Din felt no shame in having no sons. He saw strength in Gul Bano's hands, fire in Zahida's eyes, and imagination in Nusrat's fingers. And in that moment, under the soft hum of crickets and distant village chatter, he silently prayed. "Let the world say what it will. Let my daughters walk forward. I will carry their honor like a sword." Little did he know, the days ahead would test that resolve, and reveal just how deeply his daughters had listened to his every word. Storms of tradition and trials. The summer came early that year, baking the village in relentless heat. Fields cracked open, thirsty for rain, and so did tempers. Where once Karam Din's quiet defiance of tradition had been the talk of tea-houses, it had now begun to sting the pride of some of the village's elders. It began with a visit. One afternoon, Chaudhry Fayaz, the wealthiest man in the area, arrived at Karam Din's home. He rode in on a polished motorbike, a cloud of dust rising behind him like a trail of arrogance. The villagers watched as he dismounted and knocked on the mud brick wall of the humble house. Karam Din welcomed him with politeness, offering the best spot on the charpai and a glass of cold water. Fayaz wasted no time. "I've been thinking about your eldest," he said, eyes sharp. "Gul Bano. She's a fine girl, quiet, obedient. Just the kind of girl I want for my son." Karam Din's face remained calm, but his stomach tightened. He knew what was coming. "My son Bashir will inherit all my land. He needs a good wife. I'll take care of the dowry. We'll even give you some land in return." Bashir was known in the village, lazy, violent when drunk, and twice Gul Bano's age. Karam Din sat still for a long moment before he replied. "Your offer is generous, Chaudhry Sahib. But I cannot accept. My daughter will marry when she chooses, and to a man of her liking. I owe her that much." The Chaudhry's face darkened. "You forget your place, Karam Din. A poor man with 3 daughters cannot afford pride." "I have no gold," Karam Din answered evenly. "But I have dignity. That is enough." Word of the rejection spread like wildfire. Some praised Karam Din's backbone, but others shook their heads in disbelief. "He's lost his mind," they muttered. "He thinks he's raising queens." Worse yet, pressure mounted in quieter ways. A few families who had been buying Gul Bano's embroidery suddenly stopped. Zahida, who had begun helping other girls learn to read, was asked to stay away from their homes. Nusrat's sketchbook was torn by a group of boys who laughed as they did it, calling her crazy for pretending to be an artist. Then came the drought. For weeks, the skies refused to open. The well ran low. The small field Karam Din relied on for wheat gave barely enough to last a month. Hunger became an unwelcome guest in the house. Nights were filled with silence, interrupted only by the growling of empty stomachs. One evening, Karam Din sat alone, staring at a single roti on a plate. The girls had already eaten, or so they said. He knew they were lying, saving food for him. His pride cracked just a little. Maybe he should reconsider the Chaudhry's offer, he thought bitterly. What future could he offer his daughters? Poverty, isolation, and gossip? But just as the thought began to settle, Gul Bano entered, holding a small parcel wrapped in cloth. "I went to the town today," she said quietly. "Sold 5 dupatas to the market stall. He paid fair." Karam Din opened the cloth. Inside were crisp notes, more money than he had seen in weeks. He looked at her, startled. "You went all the way to town alone?" She smiled. "I wore old clothes and took Zahida with me. No one paid us any mind." That night, something shifted. Karam Din realized that while the world saw his daughters as delicate, they were in fact iron beneath their grace. But the Chaudhry was not finished. Weeks later, a government officer visited the village, bringing news of a girls' scholarship test in the nearby city. Zahida was overjoyed. She begged her father for permission to sit for the exam. Karam Din hesitated, but then nodded. "Go. Take Gul Bano with you. You've earned it." The next day, the Chaudhry confronted him in public. "You send your girls out like boys now? Do you want to disgrace our entire village?" Karam Din looked him straight in the eye. "I would rather be disgraced for raising free daughters than honored for selling them." The crowd around them murmured. For the first time, someone had stood up to the Chaudhry in daylight. Karam Din walked home with Zahida and Gul Bano by his side, sweat glistening on their foreheads, but heads held high. The road ahead would be long and harsh. But they were no longer walking in fear. The daughters rise. Monsoon finally arrived. Rain swept over the cracked land like mercy from the sky. The fields drank greedily, and for a few days, even the villagers' bitter tongues softened. But for Karam Din and his daughters, the real change came not from the heavens, but from their own hands. Gul Bano's embroidery business began to bloom. Her dupatas, stitched with delicate floral patterns and edged with mirrorwork, were in growing demand at the town market. With her earnings, she bought better thread, new cloth, and even hired 2 young girls from the village to help. She named the tiny venture Gul's Touch. It was a humble start, but a powerful one. Each sale was more than a thread and pattern. It was proof that a girl's hands could create not just beauty, but independence. Zahida's life also changed after the scholarship exam. Though she did not win, the examiners were so impressed by her intellect and confidence that they connected her with a literacy NGO working in nearby villages. Soon, she was offered a small stipend to run evening classes for girls in her own home. At first, no one came. Parents were afraid of what the Chaudhry and his men might say. But slowly, as whispers of Zahida's sharp mind spread, 2 girls arrived, then 4, then 8. By month's end, their courtyard echoed with the sounds of reading, writing, and laughter. Zahida stood before them not as a rebel, but as a teacher. Meanwhile, Nusrat, the quietest of the 3, was painting in secret. Using natural dyes, she turned bits of charcoal, turmeric, and flower petals into color. Her favorite subjects were people, faces full of emotion, wrinkled hands, eyes deep with stories. One day, a social worker visiting Zahida's literacy class noticed her sketches drying on the walls. "Who drew these?" the woman asked. Nusrat blushed and raised her hand. The social worker smiled. "There's a city exhibition next month. Children from all over Punjab are submitting artwork. You should enter." Nusrat hesitated. "I don't have real paints." The woman took a small case from her bag. "Now you do." Nusrat submitted 3 pieces. A week later, a letter arrived. One had been selected. Her portrait of a village mother and child, drawn with soft strokes and sharp feeling, would be displayed in Lahore. Karam Din stared at the letter for a long time, reading each word aloud twice, as if to be sure it was real. When he looked up, tears were in his eyes. "I thought I was teaching you," he whispered, "but it is you who are teaching me." But not everyone was pleased with their success. The Chaudhry, humiliated by Karam Din's public defiance, had not forgotten the insult. One night, men loyal to him destroyed Gul Bano's drying rack of finished dupattas, trampling weeks of work into the mud. They left a note pinned to the wall, "Keep your girls in line." When Zahida found it, she burned the paper before her father could see it. But Gul Bano, her eyes red from silent tears, went to the village elder, Baba Inayat, a respected man even the Chaudhry dared not challenge. She laid the ruined cloth at his feet. "This is not just fabric," she said. "It is food, it is dignity. Is this how we treat those who try to rise?" Baba Inayat stared at the embroidered pieces, then called a panchayat the next day. In front of the whole village, he addressed the Chaudhry. "We are men of tradition," he said. "But what tradition allows a man to destroy a girl's honest labor? We say daughters are honor, but what honor is this?" Chaudhry Fayaz, forced to swallow his pride, said nothing. But his silence was enough. From that day on, the attacks stopped. Something had shifted in the village. A few more girls joined Zahida's class. One woman asked Gul Bano to teach her embroidery. A boy even came to Karam Din and said, "Chacha, does Nusrat give drawing lessons?" For the first time in his life, Karam Din felt the tide turn, not just for his family, but for the entire village. He had not given his daughters land, or gold, or powerful names. But he had given them something far rarer, belief. That night, as he sat with his daughters under the stars, he said softly, "You were born in silence. But you've made the whole village listen." Legacy of light. Years passed, and the village that once whispered against Karam Din and his daughters began to speak of them with pride. Gul Bano's embroidery business had grown into a cooperative called Suno Saheli, a space where over 20 women stitched, laughed, and earned. Many were once confined to homes, their talents wasted. Now, they brought home wages with heads held high. Gul Bano, still soft-spoken, had become a leader through quiet strength. Her work was even featured in a women's magazine from Lahore, under the title, Threading Freedom. Zahida, always the firebrand, had become a respected social worker. She trained other village girls to become literacy ambassadors across the region. Her days were spent traveling between schools, speaking at conferences, and writing articles that challenged the traditions that once tried to silence her. She had earned a diploma in education through correspondence. No classroom ever confined her mind. Nusrat had taken flight, literally. After winning several art contests, she earned a scholarship to study fine arts in Karachi. Her departure was tearful but full of hope. Her paintings, often inspired by the life she had lived in the village, now hung in galleries across Pakistan. One of them, Baba's Hands, a portrait of Karam Din's weathered palms holding broken wheat, had been purchased by a collector. She sent the money home, wrapped in a letter that read, "This is yours. I only held the brush." At the heart of all this remained Karam Din. Now older, his hair fully gray and his step a little slower, he still rose at dawn to pray, still sat on the same charpai under the neem tree, but now watched his daughters with the eyes of a man fulfilled. One afternoon, the village council held a gathering to celebrate education and women's empowerment. For the first time in its history, the panchayat invited girls and women to speak. At the edge of the crowd, Karam Din sat quietly, his shawl draped over his shoulders, a walking stick in his hand. As the sun lowered, Zahida took the stage and began to speak. "My father once stood alone. Against custom, against pressure, against fear. He chose to believe in his daughters, not because he had no sons, but because he saw no shame in us." The crowd listened in silence. "He taught us to write our names when others would have had us signed away. He gave us choices when the world gave us cages." Then, she turned to where her father sat. "Abba, this stage is yours. We are only standing on it." People stood. Applause rose, not of noise, but of respect. Baba Inayat stepped forward, lifting Karam Din by the arm and guiding him to the center. The old man's voice cracked as he looked out. "I was told once that I was mad to raise daughters like sons," he said. "But my daughters became more than sons. They became teachers, creators, leaders." He looked down for a moment, then smiled. "And the village that once turned its back now walks beside us." After the event, people lined up, not to offer pity, but to shake his hand. A young father brought his daughter and asked, "Will you tell her your story, Chacha? I want her to hear it from you." That night, under the familiar stars, Karam Din sat with Gul Bano and Zahida. Nusrat had called earlier from Karachi, promising to visit soon. The neem tree rustled above, the charpai creaked, and the lantern on the hook beside them glowed dim but steady. "I used to fear for you girls," Karam Din said, his voice thin. "I feared the world would break you." "You gave us roots," Gul Bano replied, placing a hand on his. "We built our wings from there." "And now?" he asked. Zahida smiled. "Now we fly, but we never forget where we took off from." Silence fell. Not the silence of fear or shame, this was the silence of peace. For Karam Din, there had been no greater wealth, no louder honor, than to see his daughters carve lives of purpose from the narrow road he once walked alone. His legacy wasn't written in gold or property deeds. It was stitched in thread, echoed in words, painted in color, and carried in every step his daughters took beyond the boundaries once drawn to cage them. And long after he would leave this world, people would still say, "This is the village of Karam Din, the man who raised 3 daughters and gave the world 3 lights."